Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a little church outside of Athens, Georgia called Calvary 316. We are located off of Highway 316. Our website is calvary316.com. If you're local, come check us out Sunday mornings at 10:30. If you're not local, but maybe looking for a church to watch online, you can check out our live stream. It's on YouTube. Easiest way to find it is calvary316.live. Or you can check us out on Facebook. We also stream there as well, facebook.com/Calvary316. I am, in addition to being a pastor of a church, I am the husband of one, a father of three, and incredibly blessed to be alive. If you know anything about my backstory, I do apologize that we haven't been on the air for the last 2 weeks. Summertime, typically in the past, we actually take some of the summer months to work in some vacation time. The last 2 weeks had a lot of scheduling issues, and so we kind of geared things back. We will be, obviously, Outlaw Radio Show will be tonight. Next week, then we'll be taking another week off later in June. So just follow the schedule. We'll be kind of hit or miss through the rest of this month as well as into July. But we're so glad that you are either watching. Again, we live stream every episode of the Outlaw Radio Show on YouTube as well as Facebook. So if you're watching the live stream, welcome. If you are not watching, but maybe you're listening to the audio, every episode is podcasted, Apple, Google, Spotify. Again, we're glad you're listening. One of the advantages to doing the live stream recording is that we're able to interact with the audience. You can interact by leaving comments in the comment section of both the stream on YouTube as well as Facebook. If you're listening to the podcast, check that out. Wednesday nights, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw or our YouTube channel, outlawradio.live. I know that's a lot of information. Sometimes it's hard to follow if you're listening. outlawradio.org is our website. You can find all of that information there. If you're new to the show, in addition to the show being interactive, it is also completely unscripted. I have no idea what tonight's episode is going to be about. You, the audience, are in the dark. I'm in the dark. The only one that knows what we're going to be talking about tonight is the producer of this dysfunction, Creighton Vaughn. And aside from Creighton, I'm also joined by a group of dear friends in the studio, and we have kind of a conversational Bible study. All that being said, kind of out of the way, Creighton, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show, my friend.
Hello. How's it going out there?
So you're the guy that kind of handles the topic, right? Yeah?
Yes, I am, usually. We do have, we've got the comment section. I'm going to give my email in a second because we do like to have questions, concerns, all that kind of stuff sent in from the audience, which includes, if you have a topic that you'd like us to talk about, something in the Bible that is weird, or a question you have, or what have you.
That reminds me of something very quickly, if I may. So a couple weeks ago, at the end of the episode, we had already logged off, and you saw a comment that had been posted, and you were like, oh man, I missed this. And you brought it up to my attention, and I was like, next time we're together, I got to give a shout out to Ann David. David and I are very intimately connected because we have both had similar experiences with COVID. And Ann made a comment that my hair was growing back. It said my hair looked good. And again, if you've had kind of an extreme case of COVID, one of the side effects is that you can lose your hair. And for several weeks, I looked terrible. My hair was gone, and it's growing back. And so Ann kind of left a comment, giving me a shout out saying my hair looked good. And so I just wanted to kind of give a shout out back. Ann, I love you. I continue to pray for you. You are an inspiration to me and an inspiration to really so many people. So again, Creighton, if people would like to maybe submit a topic they would love to be in the show or for us to craft, how can they get in touch with you? Kind of how would that work from a very practical way? Because again, part of this is it's unscripted, so I don't need to know about it. No one needs to know about it. Is there a way they can get in touch with you kind of privately saying, I'd love to hear an episode about fill in the blank?
So the easiest way to do that would be to email me. And my email address is CreightonVaughn@gmail.com, which I'm assuming you cannot spell.
Go ahead and spell Creighton.
Yeah. So my first name is spelled C-R.
And Gmail. People might miss that one.
You're talking over my spelling.
Okay, get to it.
It's CreightonVaughn@gmail.com. I'm also putting it in the comments section of both YouTube and Facebook. Hopefully it doesn't give me too much spam, but we're going to find out.
If you have something, right. So if you have something you'd like to submit, a topic, passage of scripture, story in the Bible, send it to Creighton. And also if you're a single lady out there, also Creighton has put his email address. He'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, it doesn't sound desperate at all.
Joining. Well, you didn't say it. I did. So it's not as desperate. It's called intercession.
Is that what it is?
It's intercession. Although I do hear that we have a dear friend that is now single that we have to talk about later off the air.
Noah?
A good friend that no. Anyway, so before I get in trouble, and that could really get me in trouble. We're also joined in the studio by a group of friends. They're all here for the first time throughout the last month or two. We've had a combination of these gents, but all four are here. Nick, Dill Daddy, Derek, Spice Daddy, and Kyle. Fellas, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show.
What up? What up?
What's up?
We've had to reposition the camera angle to get you all four in the shot.
Big body boys all up in here. We got to get in there.
Kyle is the opposite of a big body boy.
I mean, he's here with the big body boys.
So
Guilty
Kyle,
by
you have a new
Yeah.
strategy where you're going to try to randomly wear a shirt you think one of the other guys is going to wear.
I'm gonna try to guess and predict what shirts I think will appear and try to match it as best as possible.
This would be an easy
Y'all
bet.
might recognize the
Yes.
shirt.
Creighton always wears a DeWalt shirt.
He does.
And so
What's funny is that I'm brand loyal to Ryobi. But I
Are
have
you
a
really?
DeWalt. Yes, I am.
I didn't know that was such a thing.
You'll never be able to guess what I'm wearing.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. Black polo. Anyway, you guys doing well?
Doing
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Very well.
You guys ready to unpack something that we have no idea about and have fun with it?
Always.
All right, Creighton, this is your time, man. Drop it.
Okay.
Drop it like it's
uh,
hot.
So in this week's installment of That's the Bible? What is going on?
Actually, you got to
um,
pause.
Okay,
I'm
fine.
gonna,
Every time.
I'm gonna commandeer it real quick. I do need some advice. I've had the weirdest thing happen to me. I wasn't gonna bring this up in the show, but I really do need some advice here. The strangest things happened to me over the last 3 days. So, have you ever like bumped into someone randomly, like a stranger, on numerous occasions, just out in public?
The same person.
Strange.
The same person, or like anyone, like just randomly.
I've thought of somebody like just from a memory, and then all of a sudden I'll run into them like a day or two later. Like that's happened. And I'm always like, that's really weird.
Okay, I've had something strange happen. I'll explain it and see like how I should be processing this because I'm kind of wrestling about it. So Nick's family and my family, we went and grabbed dinner Sunday night. We went to this restaurant. We ended up sitting on the patio, very small patio. There was only one other family that was on the patio with us. I recognized the dad. I noticed the dad of this family mainly because he was the douchiest dude I've ever seen in my life. I could describe him in a lot of different ways, but super manicured beards to me are like, it's like the douchiest thing on the planet. It's like Eminem's beard right
you
now.
take care of your body. Oh,
Like,
gosh.
no. I'm talking about like the uber straight lines where it's just like, it's overdone on the cheeks, the mustache, not like Kyle's because his doesn't grow in on the side. Which mine doesn't either. That's fine. But I'm talking like super straight lines, really over clean cut. Anyway, I noticed this guy and I was sitting there. We didn't talk. Our kids kind of were there. I noticed him. He noticed me. That was about it. And I only took note because it was like, man, that is the douchiest beard I've ever seen. No problem. The next day, Monday, we're driving to my mom's house, right? And we're at this intersection, 78 Old Loganville Road. We're sitting there to cross the intersection. There's a turn lane. So I'm in the passenger seat because, I can't drive because I've got limp arms. I'm sitting there, and in the passenger in the turn lane next to me, this truck pulls up, and I'm looking out the window, and it is the same guy, and he literally, I'm staring at him like unashamedly, straight up staring at him, and he turns and he looks at me, and like our eyes connected, like I recognize you, you recognize me. This is kind of strange, and I just kind of did the little kind of head nod. And he kind of reciprocated the little acknowledgement that this was awkward. And then he drove off. Weird. The next day, Tuesday, we're at the ballpark. Totally different place. At the ballpark, Theodore has his baseball practice. Jessica and I are sitting in the outfield because I like to run my mouth, but I don't want to get in trouble. So I stay as far away from people as possible. Finally, I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, I need to get a little exercise. I'm going to go for a little walk. So I'm walking around the backstop to the kind of the other side of the field. And sure enough, who's standing at the softball field? Same guy. And I stared at him. Now he didn't see me staring at him, but I'm standing there thinking, what are the odds that I have seen the same guy I don't know, have never met before, on 3 separate occasions, 3 days in a row?
The Lord's given you an opportunity to change your heart about his beard.
I'm changed my. That's
the 3 times.
3 times. Well, I walked back and I told Jessica, I was like, "You'll never believe who I just saw." And she was like, "Who?" And I was like, "The guy with the douche beard," because I had already talked about this twice. And she's like, "That's weird. What do you think about it?" And I was like, "If I see him 4 times, then I know I'm supposed to go up and talk to him." But I really thought about going up and talking to him.
So if you're that guy, go ahead and comment on the.
Right. Okay. You know who you are. And also include a picture of yourself to validate
What
my
you have to say about his
description
beard.
of it being the douchiest beard.
See, I think it's just facial hair jealousness.
Mm.
A lot of
Jealousy?
times.
Little envy.
Jealousy.
Jealousness? Is that a word?
Jealousness.
Little chin envy.
Yeah.
A little chin envy.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I don't
Chin
know. I mean, is that not weird?
That's pretty weird.
It's very
odd. It's
strange.
Groundhog
odd.
Day
It
kind
was-
of thing.
Yeah, Groundhog Day, but I'm in different places. It's not even
Was
like
he wearing the same clothes?
yeah, like a blue oversized polo.
On Sunday, you did talk about people.
Could be an
angels.
angel.
Exactly.
Now that's a different take. I could be entertaining. Could be my guardian angel.
Or an FBI agent.
To which I'd be like,
just
"Where
tracking
were you at the beginning of the year?"
He was making sure that you were going to make it out at the end, but you needed to go through that. So,
Oh,
But
thanks, Derek.
now-
Thanks for making it real.
but now you said that about his beard, and so now he's going to keep
Now-
popping up later.
I'm gonna get to heaven, and the angel with the douche beard
He's
is gonna
standing
come up, and be like, "You hate my beard?" Like, I don't hate it. I just think it's douchey.
And you'll
Your
say,
new
"Thanks
body
for
in
watching
heaven will be
Outlaw
with
Radio."
that beard.
Okay, I'm not getting anywhere here. If you're watching this, listening, hit me up. Let me know what I should be thinking about this. Creighton topic. Weird
Oh, that's
stories.
right. We have a show to do.
weird stories. I had
So-
to get that off my mind.
Yeah.
It was.
All
It's
right.
been a thing.
So, weird things that happen in the Bible. We've done
There's a lot of them.
the Ananias and Sapphira. We've done a couple. There are a bunch of them. The one I want to talk to about today is a very interesting thing that happens in Genesis when Jacob is traveling. I believe it's before Joseph gets sold into slavery in Egypt, but I'm not 100%. At any rate, he's traveling through the wilderness, comes to a city. It's the Dinah incident of Genesis chapter 34. I can give some more context if you're not quite sure what I mean by the Dinah
Okay, well-
incident.
Is there a question about the incident, or is it just like, hey, let's talk about this, like this incident, and like what we should take from it?
It's a little bit of that, and it's also I've actually had this argument with someone where I view the incident as a very negative thing. I've heard people talk about it in a positive light, and I'm trying to be vague to not,
No.
spoil
I
the
mean,
ending.
we're gonna read the story, so
Yeah.
you gotta like, you can get to, you don't have to like, no spoiler alert here. Like,
Okay, so
talk about it so we
um,
know kind of the angle in which we're gonna look at this story.
So the short version of the story is that Dinah has some form of a relationship with a prince of the city, and then through some machinations of her brothers massacre the city in retaliation.
And so you're
And-
saying some people present this in a positive way, and then others present it in a negative way. You're more on the negative side, but kind of like, hey, let's talk about this and see where it lands.
Exactly. That's exactly what I said.
Okay, well,
I've heard
I-
people talk about it as like,
Hopefully, hopefully that gave one of these guys. I have a hard time turning pages in Bibles, so hopefully one of these guys has been able to pull up the story and
Genesis 34.
Genesis 34. Kyle, you have it.
I got it.
Okay, can you read the story kind of in its entirety, and then we'll talk about it and kind of get some thoughts.
Let's do it. All right. Genesis 34, starting with verse 1. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. His soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young woman as a wife." And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. Then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved and very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing which ought not be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife, and make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters to yourselves. So you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade in it, and acquire possessions for yourself in it." Then Shechem said to her father and her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask me ever so much dowry and gift, and I will give according to what you say to me. But give me the young woman as a wife." But the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father, and said deceitfully, because he had defiled Dinah their sister. And they said to him, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. But on this condition we will consent to you, if you will become as we are. If every male of you is circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not heed us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone." And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. So the young woman did not delay to do the thing. The young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. He was more honorable than all the household of his father. And Hamor and Shechem his son came to the gate of their city, and spoke with the men of their city, saying, "These men are at peace with us. Therefore let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For indeed the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men consent to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us is circumcised and they are circumcised. Will not their livestock, property, and every animal of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us." And all who went out of the gate of the city heeded Hamor and Shechem his son. Every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of this city. Now it came to pass on the third day, when they were in pain, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. And they killed Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because their sister had been defiled. They took their sheep, their oxen, and their donkeys, what was in the city and what is in the field, and all their wealth, all their little ones and their wives they took captive, and they plundered even all that was in the houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. I shall be destroyed, my household and I." But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a harlot?"
It's like a Narcos episode.
Like a narco
Yeah.
episode. So let's just kind of recap the story to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page of what's happened. So Dinah, who is one of the daughters of Jacob, which is unique in and of itself, because we're famously given the list of Jacob's sons, because they become the 12 tribes of Israel. We're not given, typically the something's happening with the TV in the office. I have no idea what. That's weird.
Yes.
Anyway, back to back to the storyline here. Wait one second. Alexa, turn off TV. I highly recommend not buying an Alexa television because it hears weird things in the middle of a radio episode. Dinah, I think it's interesting how the story begins, because we're told, and Kyle, keep the text open because I'm not able to look at it specifically. But it kind of, the story opens where Dinah sees the daughters of men, and she's kind of intrigued by them. Kind of like, she's in this particular family, but she's looking outside of the family. It's kind of like she sees the town, she sees the party going on, she sees kind of the outside influence, and she goes to kind of explore to see what's going on. She's intrigued by it. It all looks fun. It all looks innocent. But then kind of something bad happens. She catches the the eye of Shechem, who's kind of the prince of the area. And there's a little debate as to exactly what particularly happens. They obviously have sex, and I think that's the gist of what's being described. The implications in the way that it's kind of presented in the original language is that she's raped, that it was not exactly consensual relations, but that Shechem took advantage of her. Now, whether it was full-blown rape or some type of manipulation, or whether she got taken advantage of, the text is not particularly explicit or super clear, but that at least I think is the general thought, that she was raped by Shechem. Now, again, you were talking about a very patriarchal culture, very patriarchal time period. And so Shechem likes this girl. And at this point, women are very much treated as though they're property, definitely the property of their father. Shechem wants to marry this girl. The way that it would work within the protocols is that Shechem's father, and I believe it's Hamor, is like, all right, you want this gal? He goes to Jacob, is like, my son is smitten over your daughter. I would like her to be given to my son. Obviously, she has articulated to her brothers what has happened, because they're not okay with this situation. I think it's likely Jacob is not okay with the situation either, but they take advantage of the request, obviously. The brothers, specifically Simeon and Levi, hatched this plot. Hey, this is great. We'll let you marry our daughter. Here's the deal, though, is, you have to be circumcised. In order for our people to intermingle with your people, for us to become one people, kind of the marriage of the families, you have to be circumcised. You have to remove the foreskin. What's crazy about the story is that not only is Shechem like, okay, I'll do it, and not only is Hamor like, okay, I'll do it, but they're able to convince the entire town to be circumcised so that Dinah and Shechem can be wed. And obviously there's kind of a financial interest into the town, recognizing the growing influence of this group of Hebrew people, thinking that there would be some benefits in the merging together of these two people groups, these two particular families. Somehow, and again, there's a little comedy to that, they all get circumcised. Now, there's a reason that circumcision was instructed by God to occur on the 8th day, because it's quite painful. Being circumcised as a grown adult male, not exactly something you're wanting to sign up for or jump at the opportunity, especially when you're not getting anything tangible. This is Shechem interested in another gal, and it's like, you know what? I'll get circumcised for my boy. The whole thing is a little odd. It's a little weird. But the whole town gets circumcised, all of the males. And clearly, in the process of this, they're all struggling with the physical results of circumcision. I haven't had a vasectomy. I haven't been snipped. That's not something that I've signed up for per se. But I've been told that you're down for a couple days. That's the old joke. It's a frozen bag of peas, and it's a weekend. Funny side note: the Thursday before March Madness, the opening of the college basketball March Madness, where you've got the most teams that are playing. They play all day Friday, they play all day Saturday, they play all day Sunday. I mean, there's just wall to wall basketball, and people love to fill out a bracket and kind of gamble on it. The Thursday before March Madness, vasectomies in America increased 50%. Kind of a fun fact, because guys are like, well, I'm going to be down for 3 days, and so I might as well, take 2 days off of work and get this done, and then I have every excuse to lay on the couch with a bag of frozen peas and watch basketball for 3 days. No one can harp on me. That's just a vasectomy. Today it's done with a little laser, and you're kind of good to go. Can you imagine kind of the pain and agony?
No.
You don't have there's no painkillers. There's no sleepy drugs.
No
you know.
anesthesia.
Yeah, this is like, and like, how did that happen in this town? It's like, everyone's required to do this. Let's line them up at the CVS. Did they have those drive-through lines like they did with COVID? For COVID testing,
Drive-by circumcision.
Yeah, drive-by circumcisions. At the local Target, the Stop and Shop. Oh,
I mean, think about the
one,
guy. There was at least one guy who had to have a circumcision from a guy that just got one. Like, if you do
at some point, one guy circumcises everyone. There was one guy that had to be circumcised by somebody else.
He's got that little pain built up in it.
It's easy. You made sure that the guy you did the best job on
does it on
is the guy that's doing it on you. It's like, come on, man. Although by that point you've had a lot of practice, but you're his first. Again, terrible. So the whole town gets circumcised, and it's in their day one of recovery, whatnot. That Simon and Levi are like, all right, now let's go take care of business, and they go and they slaughter everyone as retribution and revenge for what had happened to their sister, their little sister. Now again, I mean, there's kind of the humanity side of it where, you kind of read through the story and you're like, man, that's cold-blooded. At the same time, like, can you imagine if something happened to your little sister when you want to, enact some revenge? That being said, this was cold-blooded murder, and murder is wrong. Murder isn't a good thing. And then there's this reaction, from Jacob, which is, I think, again, kind of interesting because Jacob is not upset that they did this thing. He's upset with the potential repercussions of what they had done, right? He's concerned that, hey, the people groups here are going to see what's happened. We're small in number. This could be bad for the family. This could be a bad thing. So he's worried about that. Not hey, you guys just murdered a village. What were you guys thinking?
It's, hey, you guys just murdered a village and they're going to be mad.
And they're going to be mad. Although I don't know who in the village at that point is really mad.
Yeah.
But the other villages are going to be a little bit mad. So you get to kind of like, was this a good thing, a bad thing? Start with, there's nothing about this story that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what happened to Dinah is terrible. A, she shouldn't have gone to a party she had no business going to. She made a bad decision to place herself into a situation that wasn't good. That being said, let's not victim blame. It's not her fault. Something bad happened, though she might have made a poor decision. So what happened to Dinah is terrible. The prospects of her now marrying, the guy that raped her, being forced into a union with a pagan people, equally terrible. The fact that these sons, that her brothers felt the need to make a point. Again, if you look at the story, the guy that's kind of the weakest player in the whole thing, again, shocker, is Jacob. Jacob within the story, he could have, when Hamor approaches him, he could have said, hey, what your son did to my daughter is reprehensible. And in fact, it's a crime. It's something that shouldn't be stood for. It's something that we need recompense. Your son needs to be held accountable, held responsible. There should be maybe an independent inquiry, but he should be held to account. But he doesn't do that at all, does he? In fact, we have very little said by Jacob within the story. He's very passive. He kind of entertains the proposal. At least is kind of the implication of the passage, to the point that the sons feel the inclination, like someone has to do something. Somebody has to intervene. A pound of flesh is demanded. Now, I mean, they go above and beyond. They kill a lot of innocents. in the process. Now, if they had gone and they had killed Shechem, you know, I think you can kind of look at the story and maybe have a little bit of a different view that they're purely defending the honor of their sister, but they don't.
Chalk it up to frontier justice.
Right. Well, and we also, according to the law, which again comes many years after this, the law of God hasn't been written. But when we do get to the law of God, where we get, God going on the record about human behavior, such an act would be grounds for capital punishment. God would have instructed that individual to be taken outside of the city and stoned to death. Rape was a capital crime, mainly because there's no type of retribution that can be given for the raping of an innocent. And again, when we talk about capital punishment, so much within the law is punishment set up on an equal retribution. You got to make recompense, equal restitution for whatever was lost. If you steal a cow, you got to repay the cow and then some for the loss of the cow. The problem with if you murder someone, how do you make restitution for murdering a father? No, you have to therefore be murdered. You can't make restitution for taking the innocence of a young lady. So again, if their reaction to it had been limited to Shechem, I think a case could be made that was equal justice under the law. And again, you got to go back to the time period in which all of these things are happening. The thing about the law wasn't that it made concession for retribution, it restricted revenge. Because so often when we're harmed, it's not that we want, equal harm given back. We want that harm plus a little bit more.
Or a lot more.
And the law restricted, it outlawed revenge. It said there is an appropriate handling of what is just, but it limited the response to proportionality. Clearly, what these boys do is not proportional to the crime in any regard. And then, man, can you think of a bad way to go? You just got circumcised, and then you got these two guys going through town slaughtering all the males, and you can't really, you're not apt to defend yourself. So like the last day on earth, you got circumcised and then you die by the edge of the sword. It's like, bummer, man. So everything about this story is terrible. The actions of Shechem, Hamor, again, what a sleazeball. The implications, he understands what happened. He understands the lust of his son. He doesn't stand up to him. He doesn't rebuke his son. There's a lack of fathering going on, for sure. What happened to Dinah is terrible. The actions of Shechem are atrocious. Obviously, Simon and Levi, their actions are contemptible. So I find very little within the story to say, hey, this is a good thing. Now, why do people reach that conclusion? Like what argument can be made for this story being appropriate or could be presented in any type of a positive light? And in the context of everything I just said, let me try to explain that. So Abraham gets called out of Ur of the Chaldeans. I'm going to give you a land of promise. I'm going to give you a land. This is not a land that you have to take. This is a land I'm going to give. And Abraham comes into the land. He dwells in the land. Isaac, Jacob, they dwell in the land. And God has promised to grow them into a nation. God has promised to do a work. They're not given this specific instruction of command and conquer. Now, that instruction does come later, doesn't it? The people, Jacob's family, because of the famine, make their way to Egypt. They spend 400 years in Egypt. They go from being a family of 70 to a nation of a few million. And then while they're gone, the land gets populated by very pagan, wicked people. Thus, when the children of Israel come back, there would be opposition. People are not just going to hand the land back over. And so they are given the instruction, command and conquer, take what is yours. And so we see a bit more of a militant approach. That's not the dynamic in which the children of Israel are presently operating. They've not been given that mandate, not been given that instruction. Sometimes people give the indication of like, well, you know, these were wicked people. These were bad guys. It was their land anyway. They're taking action to ensure that they, you know, they're not intermingling with the pagans. I don't necessarily agree with that approach from the larger context of that God hadn't given that particular mandate. You can make the argument that what is happening is a threat to the underlying command of God to be separate. Because what's the ultimate threat of the story? The ultimate threat is that what Hamor proposes is like, hey, this is kind of a bad thing. This could put our people at odds. This could make us enemies of you, and then by default, you enemies of us. And let's circumvent all of that messiness. You just give your daughter to my son. And in fact, it kind of presents this implication. Our sons, our men will be circumcised, meaning that they can now marry your other daughters, and your sons can have the pick of our daughters. Like, again, there is multiple times within the passage, the appeal of let our people become one. Well, that's a demonic proposal because they were called to be separate. They were called to be unique, set aside, intermingling with the people of Hamor and Shechem in this town was forbidden. And so the appeal here is the danger. And so it's in that regard, again, not justifying it, that you could spin in the actions of Simon and Levi as somehow being positive, right? Of like, well, they saw the threat here. They realized that we can't have any of this. Like what they're proposing is a temptation. So we need to act. Like, again, I don't buy that, but at least that's kind of the way that sometimes it gets spun and presented. They do get rebuked. And in fact, and again, it's hard to pull some information off the cuff here. But I believe that at the end of the book of Genesis, that Simon and Levi end up receiving punishment. Not only does Jacob rebuke them here in the moment, but even on Jacob's deathbed, I think it's Genesis 50, 49, 50, there's a continued rebuke of Simon and Levi in regards to their future inheritance in the land. I know Levi isn't given any land, any inheritance. Now, it is, again, God's grace, the fact that Levi, they become the priesthood. And again, I think that carries more as a consequence of Aaron and not so much the original Levi, but the Levites, the descendants of Levi, are not given an allotment or an inheritance in the land of Israel. In fact, they are robbed of that. They're not given any land, and they're forced to be dependent upon the benevolence and the charity of others. And I think the same thing occurs with Simon as well. I think his inheritance came outside of the land, if I recall.
They're actually named together. Simon and
together.
Levi are brothers, and they receive the same curse. It's in Genesis 49.
And he gets replaced again, if I recall, and I'm trying to draw back into the archive here. I think one of Joseph's sons, Ephraim, ends up replacing Simon. Manasseh, the other son, replaces Levi in their allotment of the land. I believe. Again, if you're listening, I could be wrong on the particulars of that, and I apologize.
And that's a very hard thing to remember because basically every time the tribes of Israel are listed, they're slightly different.
They're slightly
Like
different.
they move around a lot.
Yeah. And then you get to the millennial kingdom and you have the tribe of Joseph mentioned.
Right.
And you're like, wait, what? The tribe of Joseph? I'm glad we get that at the end of the book when it's never mentioned anywhere else through it. Anyway, I think every time the list is given, it's different.
I believe
Scripture.
so.
Anyway, which kind of tells you that from God's perspective, the list is not that important.
Yes.
It's more of the overarching idea that is significant. So, in regards to this particular story, can you make an argument of there being some benefit to it? Well, I think the benefit is that, Dinah's honor was vindicated. It wasn't proportional. Nothing good happens in the story. You guys' thoughts about it, because I've been going here for 30 minutes here. It's a crazy story.
I got something right off the bat.
Yeah, jump.
I want to clear Dinah's name a little bit, because it says in verse 1 that now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. So she wasn't going out looking at the men, looking to find a husband, looking to tempt anyone or do anything. To me, that, I don't know, I could be reading into it, but to me that seems more of a, we live here, we're in this land amongst these people, like friendship maybe? I don't know. But doesn't say going out to look at the sons of the land.
I can concede that. I think her going out and looking, at the pagans, wasn't wise by purely what happens. Kind of that calling to, people talk about, well, as a Christian, can I not go to any parties? And maybe this is the old youth pastor in me that kind of coming out a little bit. Do I got to be a complete fuddy-duddy? Can I not have non-Christian friends? How do I draw that balance? And I think the easiest rule of thumb is to look at Jesus. Again, he's our model. Jesus, interestingly enough, was a partier. You see Jesus going to a lot of parties in Scripture. What's important is that every party Jesus went to, the party changed. Jesus influenced the party. The party didn't influence Jesus. And I would tell anyone, hey, you could have a group of friends that maybe aren't believers. The question you got to ask is, am I having a positive impact on them greater than maybe the negative impact they're having on me? If you're hanging out with a group of people and you're finding your moral standards sinking down to theirs, that might be a good indicator you shouldn't be hanging out with that group of people. But if you're hanging out with a group of people, maybe aren't believers, but you start seeing the Lord working and they start asking questions and like you're being a light in the darkness, well, then maybe that is a redeeming thing. If you're in a group where nothing's happening at all, you should reevaluate, if you're actually being light or you're being salt. Dinah, whether she should have gone or shouldn't have gone, I guess that's a different point that can be debated. It is tragic, though. She put herself into a situation where she was vulnerable.
Yeah.
And again, this is not to victim blame, because she, for all points and purposes, doesn't do anything particularly wrong. But she placed herself into a position where that would not have happened if she hadn't been there.
Fully agree.
I have a follow up.
Real quick, Justin had a thought real fast.
Yeah, I was, I'm a big root words guy. So, like, one thing that I was looking at is, like, what does it mean that he took her?
Yeah.
Was it a violent act or something like that? I mean, and yeah, I think he did. Was it just kind of like at a party kind of thing? He took her and raped her kind of thing. And just going off of what the Hebrew word for it is, it basically means to take for the purpose of marrying. So in my mind, I'm getting this cartoon image of a caveman that goes and hits a woman over her head to take her as his wife kind of thing. And I think there's a big cultural thing, because you had two different cultures here, and the way that culture treated it as is just a normal everyday thing, whereas Jacob's sons and stuff is like, this is an abomination. And you see this big divide of people that this secular world that thinks, oh, this is perfectly okay and acceptable, and Jacob and his sons, they knew it was wrong. So I think you have to take into that consideration too.
That's a great point. And I'll apply it, I think, in a unique way to our own culture. I think what's we live in a day and age where our world has a particular, this is how you get married. And it is very, very different than the way the Bible says this is how you get married. You know, in our world, well, how do two people get married? Well, you know, you date, you hook up, you have sex to see if you're compatible. And then you know what? You need to live together for a while. You know, you need to move in together. You need to live together. You need to see if you really want to be married. And then if you're like, hey, this seems to be pretty good, well, then it's at that point, after living together and kind of test driving the model, then you really sign up for it. That's the way that you do it. You know,
Right.
Shechem.
And that's where
Hamor.
I'm getting at is from their Shechem's.
They
point
had a
of
way
view,
of doing
They
it.
had a way of doing the stuff, and he saw a girl that he liked. He wanted to marry her, so he grabbed her. And
This is
took
what
her
we
for the
do.
Purposes. They've been taught the law. They've been taught that they had to be separated, and then all of a sudden, their sister is forced into.
Let's also
union.
add, like, they hadn't been taught the law because the law didn't exist. And they have very poor examples of how all of this works because let's be real, Jacob is married to two sisters.
Right.
You know, so Leah and Rachel, like, this is already a very dysfunctional family dynamic. You know, we have two women and one man, and, like, again, you can even make the argument, like, okay, this is how Shechem and their culture handled it. How exactly were the Hebrew people supposed to, in theory, handle it? Because you have Abraham, the father of the faith, having all kinds of issues, you know, when it came to, you know, wives and concubines and things of that nature. Isaac happens to be the outlier, you know, a man married to only one woman. So again, there's a lot of, like, weirdness, and it's hard to exactly speak with a lot of dogma one way or the other. I want to work in Derek and Nick. You guys have any thoughts? Because we do kind of need to reach some overarching conclusions about why this story is in the scripture, what lessons we can draw from it, etc. So
I honestly do not have anything on this. It just kind of like is what it is. I'm like, okay, well, they got murked for doing that, whether it was or was not rape, and like, it just kind of happened. So I don't really know what to think about it.
Interesting. Nick.
To me, this is a story about one sin leading to another sin, leading to another sin, leading to another sin. I mean, a broad spectrum. You look at an action that leads to another action that leads to another action, and it's another broad aspect is to me is you're letting someone else's sin affect you, and I know it does affect you, like personally, because it's family. But you're letting someone else's sin cause you to sin, and that to me is probably, I mean, it's pretty dumb when you think about it, because it's easy to sin on yourself. I mean, with yourself, because all that. But when you have someone else that does something that
Well, it's
causes
like
you to do something,
you step back and you think, like to your point for Shechem, you know, at the beginning of the story, in no way, shape, or form would Shechem know that his action would lead to the death of not only himself, his father, but everybody he knows.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I think one lesson is just the larger repercussions of our sin, of our individual sin, and how it can affect those around us. You know, Jacob's inaction leads to his son's overreaction, which leads to them, a bit of their cursing, and then their subsequent generations. You know, there are generational repercussions, in the lives of their families because of their poor decisions. I'm with you. I think that the way that sin metastasizes and can affect in ways that we don't see and affect innocent people.
I wish we could know like how old everybody was. Like, is this like a youthful lust kind of Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, or is this like they're older? And then that kind of goes to train up your child in the way you should go kind of thing. If the two fathers had taken the time to actually parent, would their children have gotten into these situations?
So you're kind of left with, okay, I think we can all concede
It was bad.
it was bad. and I think this is an important point, again, to try to wrap things up a little bit, that there is enough ambiguity within the text itself that there are various ways that you can read the story.
Mm-hmm.
On one end of it, you could read it the way that you perceive it, Justin, where maybe this is kind of a Romeo and Juliet. Maybe Dinah was very much a part of it. Maybe, or maybe she wasn't. And Shechem is just kind of following through the cultural norm. And he's like, I like this girl. I want to marry this girl. He takes her. And as a result, her brothers are going to free her, and it's kind of like the two amigos going and, with their swords to liberate and free their sister. Or maybe you see it the way Creighton does, where it's like, I think she's just as guilty as he, and maybe she was it was completely consensual. And there's enough ambiguity within the text. I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can read it, which leads us to a bigger point. What the heck is the point of the story, right?
Very good point to get to.
Especially when the way that you can read it is vague enough to lead to a lot of different interpretations. Again, I think what Kyle said, the first point is that it's all bad. Everything about the story is not good. Like, it all reeks. It's all a bummer. So why is this story there? And I think the story is there for two reasons. One is kind of more, it's larger. The other one's a bit more specific. The larger reason that the story's there is to give context for the end of Genesis, when these two young men end up having their inheritance stripped. Like, there is a judgment to Simon and Levi carried forth, handed down upon Jacob, his deathbed, which would seem very bizarre apart from the story. So even though the story in the 35th chapter, 34th chapter seems kind of an odd story, by the end, when you see what happens to these two young men, you're like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I know why this was their punishment. I have context. It gives you context for later. So that's important. Without the story, you'd get to Genesis 50 and be like, okay, what did these guys do so bad? which is also why you're giving kind of a weird story about Reuben as well, shacking up with someone he shouldn't have, and there being repercussions about that as well. Bizarre stories have a reason. There's a detail in the story though, that we didn't point out that I think also contributes to the larger reason. One of the verses that you mentioned referred to the land of Israel. Kyle, if you could pull that up. There's a particular phrase that's used. So Jacob is mentioned, but it's also in the land of Israel is a phrase that's used within the text. I'm stalling for you guys to find the specific verse.
We are working on it.
But I'll continue to kind of make my point. Who is responsible? So Israel is the name. God changes Jacob to Israel. Creighton, have you found it?
Yeah, it's 34:7.
Just read it. Read it.
And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved and very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing which ought not to be done. It comes right before Hamor starts talking to Jacob.
So in Israel, so the word Israel is being used to describe a geographic place, right? Which is a fascinating idea because Israel is the name that God has given Jacob. He's changed Jacob there, about to have a face-off with his brother, who he has run from for years. He wrestles with Jesus, the angel of the Lord. And it's in the course of that, that his hip gets touched, he has a limp, and his name gets changed. And it's this act of grace. You'll no longer be heel catcher. You're the chosen one of the Lord. So Jacob has this calling, but now the land is placed within the context of who has authority, who has dominion, who's in charge of it. He refers to in Israel. Jacob, this is your land. You're under the authority. This is yours, your dominion. And yet Jacob is a complete idiot in the story. He doesn't do anything in the story. He's absent from action. And he's referred to as Jacob and not Israel. He's in Israel. It's as though God's reminding him of his calling, but you're laying down on the job. You're not being who I've called you to be, because the situation would be handled much differently. And as a result, what would happen would be different. The repercussions would be different. The way he was leading his family would be different. And I think within the larger story, and I mentioned this before, but you look at the patriarchs. Genesis, this is before the law. They're all abiding in grace. There are more of their failures recorded than their successes. And here you have a story of Jacob being reminded of his calling because he was failing in his calling. And yet he's still called. And even though he made a mess of things, and this had repercussions, God's grace was still sufficient. Which to me is kind of that again, the larger reason for the story is that we see again Jacob fail, but God's calling on his life remains sufficient. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Any additional thoughts before we wrap it up? We've gotten to that hour mark. Creighton, did that kind of land?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I'm glad that we had different
Points of view.
points of view on the whole situation. I thought it was great. Another good one in the books. Good job, guys. And use that. Good job to you too, as well, I guess.
So, fellas, anything else before we get out of here?
Sir, no, I think I'm good.
Nick, have you said anything tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick.
Yeah,
Nick had
that's
some
right. You
good
did. You
stuff.
Don't
did.
listen to me.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, it's at this point that the music is rolling, and so I'm going to bring us out. Thank you so much for either listening to the Outlaw Radio Show or watching the live stream. If you're listening on the podcast, we encourage you to check out YouTube or Facebook. We stream the recording of what you're listening to live every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. You can learn all about the show, quick links to YouTube, Facebook, etc. by just going to outlawradio.org. Once again, my name is Zach Adams, and I'm so glad you joined me. And these fellas have a wonderful night, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday.